The Swedish NGO Ordfront, who's also the host for the Human Rights Forum, which I represent. I'm the Secretary General and also Human Rights lawyer. We give out yearly a prize, a democracy prize, for achievements, mainly the actions that have been made or for democracy or human rights in Sweden. This year my organization turns 50, so we decided to look outside our own borders and look at situations that are of concern for human value, human dignity, and the rights for all instead. So that is the background to this discussion. And when we've looked what is happening outside Sweden, or that also has an effect on us, that we feel is very important to bring attention to, we decided to choose sort of something that is happening and going on all over the world, but in particular in the Western world, in Europe and the United States, where people who actually perform humanitarian work are being charged and prosecuted and even facing 20 years in prison for very simple humanitarian work. So that is what this seminar today will be about. Unfortunately, we were hoping that our recipients of this year's award would join us. That person is not available right now. And that means that I'm not going to tell you either who it is. We will have an announcement later this year. So, but we will talk about that person today, so it's a bit of a riddle. Maybe you can find out who it is. Anyway, so I will start this seminar today, discussion today, with presenting a few of those individuals who have performed very courageous work, but who are now facing very serious charges for their voluntary work. A few of them. Carola Rackete. How many of you have heard about Carola Rackete? Oh, that's great. She, on the, how to say, look which year, it was, I think in many, at least alternative media, it was reported this summer that she picked up a number of, I think it was 53 migrants. They had come, or refugees that had left the Libyan coast in a raft, more or less. And she picked them up on a boat called Sea-Watch 3, which is a boat that is used by an organization. I think it was a German organization. And she asked to dock in Italy, in Lampedusa, but she was denied access to the port. And the reason was that the then Interior Minister Salvio Martin, sorry, I forgot his name suddenly. The Interior Minister in Italy, anyway, he had decided that Italy would not receive any more migrants from the Mediterranean at all. And if the only way he would say no and accept an NGO docking in his ports would be if the other EU countries would agree to immediately take care of the refugees. He did not want them to stay in Italy. So it took quite a while before any kind of negotiation started and any kind of negotiation at all took place. A few of the migrants on the boat were allowed to leave the boat because there were a couple of children, a woman who was pregnant, and a few there who took ill. And after almost 2 weeks, France, Finland, Germany, and Portugal offered, in a sense, Italy to receive these migrants. That was, as I mentioned, perhaps on June 28th. At that point, the situation on board was so bad that the refugees almost, some of them, she had to almost to stop them from jumping overboard and killing themselves because the humanitarian situation on board that ship was so terrible. And even though other countries had said that they will receive the immigrants or refugees, she didn't learn about this, and she was not allowed to dock. So what she did was she decided, I'll take the ship, I'll dock in Lampedusa anyway. Coast guards were trying to stop her, but she decided to try to avoid the ships, the Coast Guard ships, and to dock at Lampedusa anyway. And while she did that, she didn't ramp, but she hit one of the Coast Guard ships. But when the boat docked in Lampedusa, she was immediately arrested, and she was charged or accused of having smuggled immigrants to Italy and also to violated on other laws. She was immediately she was released after a court decided that there had no law had been violated, and what she did was only to protect the safety of the passengers. Pia Klemp, she's also a sea captain, which I perhaps didn't mention that Carola Rackete is. Since she's a human rights activist and a writer, and between 2016 and 18, she was the commander of 2 rescue ships on the Mediterranean. She was working for the Jugendrettet and Sea-Watch. And the ship she was captain of, the Juventa, saved almost 14,000 people from drowning. She herself helped to rescue some, I think 4,000 of them. The Juventa in the summer of 2018 was, when it was docked in Italian harbour, it was seized by Italian authorities. And they used the anti-mafia laws. And she herself was accused of cooperating with human smugglers, trafficking. And if she is convicted, the trial is not yet started, the actual accusations are not really there yet, but if she is convicted, she risks over 20 years in prison. It's been well, afterwards, there have been some revelations about that the ships had been bugged by the Italian authorities, and also that they had some infiltrators as well on board the ships. So, in a sense, it means it says that these NGO rescue ships that are hardly allowed to do much work in the Mediterranean today. You know that most of the rescue missions are performed by the Libyan Coast Guard outside the Libyan coast, which is often where these ships end up when in need of help. And when the Libyan Coast Guards rescue, if they do, they bring them back to Libya. And perhaps you have heard about the accusations of torture, maltreatment in the camps in Libya. So that was never an alternative for either Pia Klemp or for Carola Rackete, because that was what they were told. If you want to pick them up, you should hand them over to the Libyan Coast Guard and back to Libya. I want to say also that although the Interior Minister Salvini had to step down, the Parliament enacted a decree that during his time in the Parliament, which means that if an NGO actually docks without permits on an Italian harbour, they risk a fine. The captain risks a fine for €1 million, and they seize the ship. And even though he has stepped down, this law was also questioned in the Senate, a vote of confidence. But 160 of the members of the Senate voted that the law should stay and not be removed. So it's still working in that sense. Another person who's been on the ship Juventa is the Spanish firefighter Miguel Roldan. He used his 20 days leave of absence in the summer of 2017 to go to the Mediterranean to work on Juventa instead of having a vacation, and that was, as I mentioned, by the German NGO Jugendrettet. And during his time, those 20 days, he contributed to rescue 5,000 lives. The ship itself, Juventa, has rescued 14,000 lives. So these NGO ships are really, really important for saving lives in the Mediterranean. But he also, in interviews afterwards, he also has told the journalists that sometimes they actually were not even allowed to enter Italian territory, sea territory. And they actually had to see and watch people drowning before their eyes because they were on Italian sea water, and they decided they had tried to the best extent not to enter because they knew that the ship would be seized. Anyway, when he got back to Spain, there was a charge waiting for him on having participated in human trafficking and also having illegally helped for sort of aided and abetted illegal immigration. Both Roldan and Klempe risks 20 years in prison. And it's said that charges will be probably brought against them this winter. We'll see if it happens or not. Sara Madini comes from Syria. In 2015, she fled the war together with her sister Yusra, who was a very talented swimmer from Syria. They got to the Turkish coast and entered a raft, or a dinghy, together with 18 other refugees from Syria. And when they got to, they were aiming for Greece and Lesbos, and when they got close to Lesbos, their dinghy that was actually only meant for 6 people, and there were 20 on it. It started to sink. So the sisters and a couple of others from the boat, they jumped in the water and then swam and pushed and dragged the dinghy to Lesbos, where they all were saved. And this created quite a lot of sort of press all over the world that they were these lifesavers, the young swimmers from Syria. They ended up in Germany, and Yusra was in the Olympics in 2016, where she competed in butterfly swim and freestyle. But Sarah decided, who's now a student in Germany, she decided to go back to Lesbos and continue to help refugees who entered the island. And she worked with the local Greek NGO Emergency Response Center International, ERKI, that helps people in distress around Lesbos to get onto the island. In 2018, in the late summer of 2018, when she was leaving Lesbos, she was arrested by Greek police. And she was charged and accused of belonging to a criminal organization that had sort of aided traffickers for financial purposes, but also for money laundering and espionage. She spent 107 days in a high-risk security prison in Athens before she was released on bail on December 5th, 2018. And she was the same charges have been brought against her friend and also companion, a friend that was also working for voluntary work for the Greek organization ERKI. The activist Sean Binder, who's an Irish national student. He worked a number of months on Lesbos, but he's also charged in the same case. Both of them, if they are sentenced, or they can risk 25 years in prison. This is Dr. Scott Warren, a geography teacher from Arizona. He works with an organization called No More Deaths. And they have been working in the borders in Arizona, in the deserts in Arizona, close to the borders to Mexico, helping refugees survive traveling through the deserts and other of the parts that are most difficult to enter into the United States, because all other roads are closed. And what they do mainly is that they place water cans and sometimes food, perhaps baked beans or something, in the desert, so that the refugees will survive, because when they have come that far into the desert, many of them die. Thousands of people have died. We don't even know how many have died in the deserts because of lack of water and dehydration. And so this is just a very simple way to save lives. At one point he was approached very close to shelter in Ajo, Arizona. He was helping two young men to, I need to see, Cristian Perez Villanueva from El Salvador and Jose Zacaria Godet from Honduras. They were just asking for his help to find somewhere to stay for the night, more or less. And because of that, he helped them to show where they could stay. He was arrested, and he was charged with very serious crimes. First of all, it was human trafficking, and for having conspiracy that he was trying to keep these sort of illegal immigrants from the authorities. And he was tried this summer, and the prosecutor, he wanted him to go to prison for 20 years. 5 years for each of the two young men he helped, and 10 years for the voluntary humanitarian life-saving work he did with No More Deaths. It was a hung jury because the jury couldn't decide couldn't make a joint decision whether he was should be held accountable or not. And it could have ended there, but the prosecutor, through the Trump administration, decided to appeal the decision by the court, and he is currently on trial in Arizona for, I think it's Tucson, and has been this week. So he faces now, they have dropped the charges on conspiracy, but remains on human trafficking for the two young men. So he faces more or less 10 years in prison if he is convicted. So this is the background of some of the individuals. We know that there are many others also who have been charged. In many cases, the charges have been dropped finally, but there is this we can see that this is going on more often, and it's a way of, we believe, that's why we want to bring attention to this. It's a way both to diminish sort of everyone's right to life and human value, because if we believe that what they do is a crime, whose lives are those lives then not worth saving? So that is what we want to bring attention to in giving the prize to one of these individuals. With that, I want to give the floor to Matthias, who will talk a little bit more about this, what we think is the reason behind all these severe accusations and perhaps punishments, and the politics behind it.
Is this sort of okay, or should I bring it closer to me?
It's okay.
This is better, maybe. Okay. Done with this one.
Those of you who speak or read Swedish might have seen the big ads for the Swedish military defense forces everywhere in the subway and the public space, where they talk about future as something yours to enjoy and theirs to defend. This is something that the Swedish Defense Forces protect for all Swedish citizens, those who properly belong to the people. And something that could also be extended to all human beings. It was not extended to Alan Kurdi. His future was not defended. And Anna wanted me to talk about, put this into context of racism, globally and nationally, and then open up for discussion. And the reason I should maybe add, or I should also probably say that I'm a professor at the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies of Racism at Uppsala University, and do a lot of these things as part of what I do. But the reason for, you've seen this picture of Alan Kurdi, right?
Yes. No. Yes.
There is another picture of Alan Kurdi that's more common shown, right? We all know it, we don't need to speak about it. I think I immediately associate to this picture when we heard her name, Alan Kurdi. And this way he represents all of them who are not yet named, but similarly have died in the Mediterranean. And I think that a lot of you have forwarded images like this. You have shared it to people. Pictures of people dying in the Mediterranean, hordes and hordes of people incarcerated in various hotspots, people treated like subhumans, they're dying, and we do it because we want to cause outrage. We want to call for solidarity, we want to call for change, right? But by distributing the other, not that picture, but the other kinds of pictures, we are also actually doing something that I think is very problematic. We are part of normalizing the images of these people's bodies as bodies that drown, that are killed, that are punished by death for trying to trespass a border. And by the very sheer fact that we have seen these pictures over and over and over again, and this research shows very clearly. Have you seen a picture too many times, it stops shocking you. It becomes normal. The sun goes up, the sun goes down, and here are some migrants drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. It doesn't shock us anymore, it doesn't provoke us. It becomes part of a natural order of things. And this natural order of things is basically a racist order of things. It's based on a systematic classification of people into various kinds that are bestowed, we say, with some inherited qualities, uniquely theirs. And these are arranged on a scale between the poles of worthy and unworthy lives, along the axis of which we are distributing unevenly wealth, resources, status, and possibilities of having a future and having a dignity. This is racism. Racism is not primarily something people say. It could not be restricted to a figure of thought, an ideology, an idea, an association. It could not be personalized. We are accustomed now to personalize racism. Think of racism as a sort of moral deficient in the intolerant few people who, like the Nordic resistance movement, the National Socialist movement in Sweden, now and then call for a demonstration to show us all how few they are. That's what they're doing. And problematically enough, lots of people think that they are the racists. There they go. You can point at them. And I think it's more important to understand that racism is also something that we do. And I see racism as a technology for uneven distribution of resources between various categories of human beings, from fully human along the pole of worthy lives, universal mankind globally, within a given territory of a nation state. These are the people, those who properly belong here, those who are entitled to feel at home at a certain place. And it's formed by processes of excluding other kinds of people on the basis of religion, culture, biological features, or blood, or whatnot. And at the bottom of that there is the unworthy lives. Those who are not even human. Those who do not belong to the people. Those whom we can let die in order to secure the well-being of mankind properly, of the people, those who belong to a territory. And it's exactly this mechanisms that we now see replayed in all of these waters and deserts. We give water to dogs, don't we? So far, it's not been criminalized to give water to dogs. If you put out a bucket of water and let the dog drink, the police will not come and arrest you. The border patrols will not harass you. But if the wrong kind of body drinks that water, you have committed a crime of solidarity. You have trespassed these lines, and you are trying to feed the unworthy life, which threatens the well-being of the worthy lives. And that's why you are criminalized. And when we talk about racism, it's important, I think, also to understand that racism, these collective identities bestowed with inherited features, sometimes called races or cultures, or religions or kinds, or types, whatever. They are not given by nature. There is no universal racism. Racism has a history. It could be studied empirically. And we know how it transforms and metamorphoses and constantly changes its appearance in order to stay. So we can have a mechanism of reproduction of inequalities put in place and still call us good human beings, because we know that racism today, being a racist, nobody wants to be that, but the other is okay. And we need to understand that the category of migrant also have been racialized, taken on the appearance of race. In Sweden we talk about first generation migrants, second generation migrants, third generation migrants, and now we're talking about the fourth generation of migrants. So migranthood is therefore something that is inherited, which means that it has become a collective identity with inherited futures. We explain a lot of things by the fact that, oh, this person is a third generation migrant, hence he is bound to be more criminal than others. He will have a low status work and he might not get a job according to his qualifications. And I think it's also the final thing I want to say before I give it back to you. I like to talk a lot, so is that this also points, I think, to another extremely important feature inherited in racism as a technology. And that's the fact that when you meet a person like Alan Kurdi, or any of those on vessels in the Mediterranean Sea, or a person walking in the Sonora Desert, crossing the borders to the United States, and is apprehended because he lacks proper papers. He cannot show that he belongs either he has the right citizenship. Therefore, his judicial rights are stripped from this person, one by one by one. And what only will remain is naked life. And this naked life that continues to live and breathe and think, but has no rights that comes with citizenship in a certain place, in a certain territory. When we meet such a figure, that's the only time that human rights have any value. Because otherwise we talk about human rights in the abstract, don't we? But the only time it could have practical value is when a person is stripped of every other meaningful right except the right that he or she should be bestowed by being born a human being. And we could easily observe how all those who talks about the universal human rights evaporates like thin air. They abandon this person. They let him die. And now they have started criminalizing human rights defenders who insist on the universality of human rights, who will not go away, who still claims that this is a person, this is a human being. I will give this person shelter. I will give this person food. Maybe water. Maybe I could give him some of the possibilities that comes with being human if you're born in another place. And then the powers that be in all the European countries, in the United States, in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Canada, will criminalize that person, will criminalize you or any other human rights defender for violations of law and decency. So therefore I think that this prize, I think it's a superb prize. Whoever will get it in person. Because I really do think it's a prize for all of those who still stubbornly insist on human rights universality. It gotta be universal. If it's not universal, it does not exist. There can be no exception. So thank you.
No, I actually want to continue the discussion because if this is you talked a little bit about this, but this is not a racism that we see within a few people. If you look at, for example, what Salvini has said and Orban in Hungary, they are sort of applauding themselves for this kind of restricted migration laws, and they talk about protecting the borders, and they badmouth people like Macron, of course, Soros, who they accuse for opening the borders and things like that. But they also use very, very serious language, like the Viktor Orban has called African refugees for the new slaves, or migrants for poison, and he talks about invasion instead of migration. How does this affect the people in general, would you say? Because they're gaining more and more support in Europe that has a very terrible past, not more than 70, 80 years ago. How does that affect us? Because we're not members of the NMR, but we are voters. But why do people vote for it? And do we not see what is behind all these words and these new laws and restrictions?
I think people see. People are not stupid. Generally. but I think that what you point at is this dehumanizing discourse, this vocabulary that by its repetition becomes also something normal. If a person, an elected person in any parliament start using this language over and over again, and you see it across the spectrum, that becomes a legit way of naming these people. So we have today, I think, a more visible, spectacular racism than what we used to have in the mid-90s, maybe. And a spectacular racism that explicitly can kill so many people in front of our eyes and invite us as witnesses, and thereby accomplish this. People who are part of this system. And I think when they talk about defend Europe, they are using, of course, I right now talk a lot with fascists, and I'm writing about fascism and violent racism. And this language that they use is a mere reflection of the same language as the radical nationalists, more self-identified, alt-right, identitarian fascists use. It's the same. You need to defend Europe. And what they are saying is that you need to defend the proper people, those who belong to this place, those whose concern. If they start to say, who has the right to say that it doesn't feel like home anymore? It's just certain people who can say that. A person born here in Skäggetorp by parents born in Somalia, if that person says that, I don't recognize Linköping, it starts to change too much, I don't feel at home no more, then people will go, no, you're not home. Because racism constantly produces that entitlement to a place. It's a connection between blood and territory, blood and soil. And that territory might be the national borders, or it could be the global borders, right? But it's the same logic. And that's why I think that this is so important. Because if we agree, if we let this happen, if we would accept being witnesses, whereas they are bereft of their humanity, we are in the same very second bereft of our own humanity. So I think this is really, really serious.
I was also thinking, because how would you describe? I mean, because the reason, also the practical reasons why people cannot get into the EU anymore are decisions like the anything from you need a visa, and then you can't get to buy a normal airplane ticket, and then you have the transportation responsibility, the Dublin rules and things like that, which makes it impossible to reach Europe legally today. And then you have, but I'm thinking of where we would place Sweden in all this. I mean, we're a little bit far from Mediterranean, but for example, when when Salvini asked the rest of Europe to receive the immigrants on Raketis boat or ship, Sweden said that, no, we're not going to help out because we did enough in 2015, so we've done our share. This kind of closing the borders. How would you place Sweden in that?
Sweden right now tries to hide behind the rest of Europe by its location, and they're trying really hard. But I think I need to just add to what you said, that you could actually buy your way in. But because this, that you can't get a visa, you have a problem entering, blah blah blah, it doesn't apply to people with money. If you come from the class supersede race here, and you cannot talk about racism without also talking about class, gender, sexual orientations, and all of education, all of these things. So for instance, there is a high score. If you measure things, you can measure the way that anti-Muslim racist discourse has been normalized in Europe. It's super normalized. That does not prevent the king from kissing the Saudi king. And that's absolutely not obscene, but very, very normal, because of it's the blue blood that supersedes the other things. And you know that there is a burqa ban in France. You know that? And it's also applied to women wearing niqab. It's too bad I don't have my own computer, but I have so many nice pictures of French policemen open the doors for niqabi women walking into a Gucci store. And these are women from the Arab Emirate or from the Saudi Arabia or Bahrain that are super rich. And they are perfectly welcome, so it doesn't apply to them. They don't have no problem with getting the visa. You can buy yourself in to citizenship into a country also.
But another phenomenon that we see also is with the EU migrants, poor EU migrants who have decided to use their right to travel freely in Europe, and the response often has been, particularly from in this case from the Swedish government, that we should not give any money to people who are begging on the streets, and now prohibiting begging and things like that, and also trying to sort of exclude them from the right to free traveling within Europe. This is also a matter of class. Did we forget about poor people's wanting to travel and to find a new life in another country in Europe when this law was enacted, or a decision, or the freedoms in the EU were decided upon, or did we just forget that this might happen because they are using their rights, and still we want to call them all that more or less illegal and non-cooperative. So it has to do with class, but it has also to do with ascribed race, because these are Roma people. And in Stockholm, for instance, where I live right now, the police is really good at stopping this. It's forbidden to sit in a place more than 60 times 60 centimeters for more than 2 hours in a row. I don't know if you know that, it's police procedure. And that applies in practice only to Roma people, not to white kids hanging out. I've never seen any white kid hanging out, being chased away by the police, but if you're a Roma person sitting there. So it's both. And I think also it's important to see the way that the borders are not only these physical borders, but they are also borders that could be suddenly established. It just goes up a wall in the subway or in public space, and you have all these practices where people,
You know, I don't know how many of you were not from Sweden, but you have all these ethnic and racial profiling that re-establishes borders also within the nation's territory. So having securely got entrance doesn't mean that you could relax and try to do something more meaningful with your life.
Do you have any questions?
Let's open up.
I'm thinking about Sweden's role in all this, and I'm a little old, so I've been around in the 90s and the 80s, and at that time, Sweden could make their own decisions. We were not a part of the European Union, and we make our own decisions. And we have big problems with racism, and we have big problems with movements on the very, very right. But the thing that I think is the most powerless government we have today is that today Sweden say we can't do anything because we are a part of the European Union. So we take all our decisions is depending on what's happening in the European Union. And I want to ask you this, because we know each other. I want to ask you this. What are you thinking about that? How can we change? Because something has to change here. It's all a big box of the same thing. And the result is that there is a very far right movement in every country. And every country say, we can't take our own decisions. Because the European Union, we have to follow the European Union decisions. So what do you think about that?
Two things very quickly then, because it's a very large discussion.
Yes.
And I think that we are already part of the European Union. And it has a lot of negative consequences, of course. But sometimes for some people, not that bad. So for instance, the Sami nations get their rights secured by going to the European court, and the Swedish government wouldn't allow them no such rights. So Europe could, you know, that system, Europadomstolen, Court of, what was the technical term? European Court? Could also be, of course, used if you want to use that, you know, those tools.
Can I just comment on that? Because, for example, in Sweden we have this temporary law when it comes to asylum or protection. And from my point of view, that law is violating the European Convention for many reasons. And one of them being that they, the reasons they put out for actually enacting this law is that we want to pressure the rest of the EU to receive more immigrants or refugees. And that is not something that you're allowed to use as an sort of exemption from the European Convention. It's not even in that one of the sort of prerogatives of a state. But this has not been, as far as I know, been challenged in the European Court. Unfortunately, I wish it would. I could do out if anyone wants to. But this is so. But I agree, because this has been the case when it comes to foreign policies as well. And Sweden is often talking about we need consensus. But I think, as you say, that they are hiding behind it sometimes. But when it comes to asylum laws, they are actually not allowed to have different approaches, because there isn't a European asylum system as such in place. And the problem is, I see that when we have the governments we have now and we've had for a few years, if not even that government wants to do anything, what will happen if we have another government that is perhaps even not, so that is might have more influence from political parties that are even stronger against migration, the Swedish Democrats, of course. Yeah, so the future looks really bad in that sense if we are not doing anything right now. If this government says we won't help because we did enough and we closed the borders. So it's really, for me, that's really worrying.
And if I could And take the second point, maybe this is too theoretical or something, but I think it's not really, the way that those who administer the nation state cannot take the decisions they need to secure the well-being of the constituency. It's not depending on whether you're a member of the European nation or not, the European Union or not. That's a fact in every nation state. And I think that, and it depends on a lot of things. Globalization, corporate power, that so many important things that you need to decide on are no longer up to negotiations among the elected, but decided in the corporate steering halls and boards and all of that. And to understand this and also put it in the context of the rise or return or revival, or whatever you wanted to call it, of fascism. Because it's not something that you only see in Sweden. You see it or only see with Salvini in Europe, but it's across the world. In so many places. You see it in Turkey, you see it in Russia, you see it in India, you see it in the Philippines, in Brazil, in so many places. I think that could be explained if you read Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian philosopher who tried to understand what times he lived in the 20s, when fascism originally came forth in Italy. And he said that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. He said that we are living in an interregnum between two stable orders. And I think that's correct today again. The old is dying, the old world of nation states and that have sovereignty within their borders, that's gone away. And the utopia, multicultural, diverse, happy-go-lucky globalization is not happening either. And the future, as you said, looks kind of bleak. And I think a lot of people turn their back on the future and look to the past. What Sigmund Bauman talks about in terms of retrotopia. And that's why so many fascists try to find elements of the past to revive and secure the well-being again. That won't work. Fascism won't work, we know that. So I think it's going to come a world beyond fascism. The meaningful question right now is how many lives it will take before fascism collapses next time. And if fascism comes to power really strong here, there is no Soviet Union. And I know that the United States used to pride itself that we were the one who defeated Hitler. It's like, all right, nice for Hollywood, but as an historian, no. You have to account for the role of the Soviet Union. And whatever you think of the Soviet Union does not exist. The only thing that does exist today is anti-terrorist laws, surveillance systems, criminalization of solidarity, of resistance, and all of that. That's the future.
Yeah, and I'm also afraid, because I just wanted to say that this will actually go further, because there is one thing, if you want to, you can break the law for saving lives, and you might end up in court, but normally it ends up in you being released for humanitarian reasons, and that's the part that has been lost today. That is not just something that...
Everyone needs to go out and do the Rosa Park.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if harbor refugees will be a crime in Sweden soon, or something, or similar things. We need to resist that. But the problem, of course, is that, for example, in many of these countries, in particular in the trial against Scott Warren in the United States today, it's actually the Justice Department, the Trump administration, who is counterpart. So you could imagine what kind of resources you need to defeat or to be successful in a court of law. for this. So we have, our price is very small, it's only 10,000 Swedish crowns. But I know all of these individuals who are now facing prison time or facing trials have different kinds of crowdfunding and things like that. So I would urge you to look up, because we don't need any more examples like this. We need the courts to say that this is not a crime. So we hopefully don't end up in having more and more trials of solidarity work. That was my final question, and we will announce which one of these will win our prize as soon as possible, probably, and invite that person also. So keep a lookout for that. Any final questions, Matthias?
I like
Oh,
that.
sorry,
I read she's
comments.
skilled at this. She's doing a TV series.
Yes, it is a cliffhanger. I'm just waiting to see.
I don't know the end time, but do we have time for more questions or interventions?
I think we have like 30 seconds or 1 minute, so we might have time for at least one.
If there was one?
If there was one? Okay. If not, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Matthias.